Welcome in, everyone, to our first episode of our MLB season outlook. I'm here with my good friend Joe Romano, and today we're going to take a look at the American League East.
We're going to start from the bottom and work our way up. We're going to start with the Boston Red Sox since they finished 78 and 84, which meant they came in last in the division.
So, taking a look at the Boston Red Sox offseason moves, more looking at who they lost than who they gained. Losing Xander Bogaerts is the big one. Nathan Eovaldi, probably their top pitcher last year. JD Martinez. These are all guys that have been in Boston for a long time and provided huge output for the team. Even in a down year last year, these are all some of their biggest guys that are now gone.
Yeah, for Xander Bogaerts, as far as it goes, everybody in Boston loved him. He was their guy the past few years, ever since they especially lost Mookie a few years back. But a 31-year-old shortstop, giving him an 11-year deal, 42 at the end of that contract. I don't know. I also think the Padres overpaid for him a little bit. Like that was a big deal, a big commitment that I think, yeah, like he was solid, huge part of the lineup. I think overall it's going to be the better move for the Red Sox to move on for him.
Some additions, most notably probably in-house, the Rafael Devers extension, 10 years. And then also they signed a player from overseas in Japan, Masataka Yoshida, who's an outfielder, to a 5-year contract. Other than that, they did some light trades and signings like Kenley Jansen in their bullpen. They traded for Adalberto Mondesi, really small signings. And you also have to take into account that their big signing from last year, Trevor Story, won't play this season until at least the halfway point, maybe even more with an elbow injury.
I think one of the more underrated moves they've had this offseason was bringing in Justin Turner. He's a solid guy to bring around, veteran leadership, especially for a young group of guys like this who are unproven. The Japanese signing, it's always risky to bring in a guy from overseas. You don't know how they're going to translate to the MLB level, especially since he's an offensive player. We've seen the past few years. It hasn't worked out too well for some of those teams. The pitchers, on the other hand, they usually come over a lot better. Um, Shohei, he did really well. The Yankees with Tanaka, like the pitchers usually are the ones who can perform just as well, but we'll see. I mean, I'm hoping he could perform well. I love to see a good Japanese player play well.
So the projected win line for their regular season is at 77.5, right where they ended last year at 78 and 84. You look at their starting lineup, projected starting lineup without Story, and it's looking pretty ugly. Currently, their projected lineup goes Yoshida, Hernandez, Devers, Turner, Verdugo, Duvall, Cassis, Arroyo, McGuire. After that 5 spot, things get kind of shaky. You also have Kike Hernandez playing shortstop for the Red Sox in the interim of Trevor Story being out. We don't know how that's going to go. There's a lot of question marks in this lineup.
Yeah, and especially going back to Story being out. Like, granted, he didn't play the best last year, but just having like a guy who's been proven in the past in the middle of your lineup, like that's big to have. And like you said, after five, it kind of just dips down. Like Duvall's shown some power numbers in the past, so that might actually work out well for him. Going to Boston and Fenway with the smaller stadium compared to some other places, but I don't know. I think, especially considering how much better their division got this offseason, I feel like you got to take the under here. Like their rotation is also not the best here either. This is a team that needs some improvements in order to hit that over, I think.
Looking at that rotation, currently it's set up as Sale, Kluber, Pavetta, Paxton, and Garrett Whitlock. Um, Paxton is just coming off of Tommy John surgery. That's a big question mark right there. Chris Sale is always a question mark. Joe, you had a stat on him about his past.
Yeah. Chris Sale, I mean, he's supposed to be healthy as of right now, but in the past 4 years, he's only made 36 starts. Granted, one of those was the COVID year, so we'll give him that. But since 2021, he's only pitched in 11 games, and he's a 4.09 ERA. So is he going to be a shell of himself that he used to be a god back in Chicago, but ever since he's come to Boston, he's been hurt constantly and has not performed well at all.
We know what he can do. It's just will he be able to do it? And then even if he is, can he return back to his form? As far as the rest of that pitching squad, Kluber has been bouncing around now since his Cy Young days. He had 4.34 last year for the Rays.
That's not gonna
He
cut it.
he stayed healthy throughout the whole year, but that's currently their projected two starter. So that's not really what you want in your two. Nick Pivetta pitched okay for the Red Sox last year, had a 4.47. These are just guys that are shaky.
Yeah, these are
Shaky.
guys that I mean, you see that we've read their numbers. You know they're gonna get lit up every now and then. Like there's not gonna be a whole lot of consistency in this rotation. I mean, Garrett Whitlock, he was decent last year, but that was also, I mean, they moved him to the pen and I think he'd be way better out of the pen. When they moved him back there, he had a 2.24 ERA with .99 whip. Like those are some good numbers that I think they should keep in that bullpen, considering how weak it is also. Like there's a lot of question marks on this team.
Whitlock is also coming off of September hip surgery.
Oh God. So
So
like there you go. There's another thing.
you
Like
have
this
three pitchers on this team who are all coming off major injuries. Chris Sale's injury being that he doesn't play. They did sign Kenley Jansen, who's been good for many years now. So when he comes into a 7-1 deficit, I guess it'll stay that way. Um, this team, this team's in a gap. It's clear. They had their run, big run in the 2010s and they started into the 2020s, but we're in a transition now for the
yeah,
Red Sox.
you can clearly see this team is not ready to win this year at least. I mean, they have some pieces, but it's not going to be enough to get them to the playoffs. And considering everything else they have to face, like the Orioles are young and coming up, the Yankees are the Yankees, the Blue Jays, they looked great last year, and even the Rays, like the Rays are always going to be scrappy and figure out a way to win ball games. So the Red Sox, I'm definitely taking the under here at 77.5. Yeah,
I
it's
will
not.
also be going with the under of 77.5. I don't know if they'll be the last place team in the AL East. This team by no means is like a tank team.
No,
They're not
no.
like a give up team, right? When you play this team, you can't just overlook them, especially if they're playing at home. But this this team's not built for any kind of postseason hope.
Yeah, like you said, they're not going to be like competing for the number one pick or anything like that, but they're just not going to be. I don't think they're going to be fighting for a playoff spot. Like I think they'll be fighting to be a 500 team.
So now we're on to our next team, which is the Baltimore Orioles. They went 83 and 79 last year. No longer an easy pick to be the bottom dweller of the AL East. They surprised people last year. They have one of the best farm systems in baseball after what's been closer to a decade of stinking, and they they could do it again. Their line is set at the same as the Red Sox, 77.5.
Yeah, I think out of the Red Sox and Orioles, they're more likely to hit their over here. Granted, they won 84 wins last year, which I think everybody was surprised by. I don't think anybody had them winning 80 games. Like I think their over under last year was set at like low 70s, and a lot of people probably took their under. I know I did. Um, but this team's young and they're good. Everybody in their lineup's under 28 besides Adam Frazier, who's their nine hitter, so he may not even be in their lineup. And it's a good young team, and I'm excited to watch them play.
Looking in at the Orioles' projected starting lineup, we have Mullins, Rutschman, Henderson, Santander, Mountcastle, Urias, Stowers, Hayes, and Adam Frazier. When you hear that, not the worst team. Obviously, they're a very young team. Cedric Mullins has been great for a few years now, much better than expected. Adley Rutschman had a fantastic rookie season. Gunnar Henderson came up at the end of the year. He's their number one prospect, I believe, still. I don't know if he graduated from the rankings. Santander's always been solid. I mean, this team's solid. They're young. They're going to keep improving. For them, it's about showing that they can still kind of do what they did last year.
Yeah, like you said, Cedric Mullins leading off. He was an all-star 2 years ago. Fell off a little bit, but I'm sure he'll bounce back. Like he still was solid last year. Rutschman, he's only 25, so he's going to keep improving. You know how it is, and he's a catcher, so that's a huge plus. Not catchers are very hard to come by. Mountcastle is perfect everyday first baseman. Got a lot of power. Could get his average just up a little bit higher. I think he could honestly be an all-star. I think the most underrated guy on this team is Ramon Urias. He had 16 homers in only 118 games. Definitely could be like a 25 homer type guy. Like you said, Gunnar Henderson. He's the number one prospect in all of baseball. Like still listed there. He's still on that list. And when he came up last year, he played well. He had a 123 OPS. Granted, it was a small sample size, but I think he's going to be, if not my favorite, one of my favorites to win Rookie of the Year this year.
And even like the Orioles took a flyer on Adam Frazier, who just like 2 seasons ago was one of the top trade deadline targets. And he disappointed in both San Diego and Seattle. But on a team like this, there's not too much expectation for him. Maybe he can kind of return to what he was doing beforehand. So while we both think that the Orioles' projected batting lineup is serviceable, at least their starters cannot be in that category. We're looking at Kyle Gibson, Cole Irvin, Kyle Bradish, and Dean Kremer. I don't see a fifth starter as of now. Uh, After that starter lineup, we have no idea who it could be. It can't be anyone who can help. Um, these are all guys. They signed Kyle Gibson to a 1 year contract. Gibson had a 5.05 ERA last season,
Oh, that's worse than I thought.
which is not not good. He's 35 now, former first round pick. That's their projected one starter.
Oh
They
my
just
God.
traded for Cole Irvin in what I thought was actually a good trade for them. They barely gave up anything to the Athletics, who are a team that we will most certainly be talking about in a later episode. Um, Irvin had a 4.11 ERA the past 2 seasons. He's a fine for any like he's a guy on like a postseason roster you have as like your 4 or 5, someone who like moves to the bullpen at the end of the year to get ready. But he's there too. So and then we don't even really need to talk about the other guys. One thing I do want to mention though is that the Orioles have a big prospect, Grayson Rodriguez, in the waiting. We'll see if he makes it up at any point this year. That could definitely be a help to this sad squad.
Yeah, like you said, Grayson Rodriguez, I mean, he's got to get a shot this year. Look at how bad this rotation is. It is disgusting to look at. He probably might even make the opening day roster with how bad this is. Like, we don't even know who their fifth starter is going to be. Kyle Gibson had a really bad year, honestly, worse than I even thought. Like he's a good 3 to 5 rotation guy, eat up innings, he'll pitch the whole year probably, but not who you want to have as your one. Um, Realistically, this team's ERA is probably going to be above a 5 if I had to guess. Like this is gross. This is absolutely disgusting.
One thing that I forgot to mention is they do still have John Means, who is a very good pitcher, but he is coming off of Tommy John surgery, expected to be back at some point during the season, I believe. We'll see where the Orioles are at that point, but I don't know. I also want to mention that they do have a very good closer that they found last year in Felix Bautista, who is currently projected to have an ERA almost under 3. That is one bright spot of this pitching staff. So
Yeah,
looking
like
at the over under of 77.5 for this team, me personally, I'm thinking over, but barely. I mean, it depends how all their young guys kind of flesh out. Their pitching's really bad, but as we all saw last year in the new Baltimore stadium dimensions, it's pretty hard to hit a ball out to left. So maybe that gives them a little bit of hope in what they can do because they have guys like Mullins, who's not really that big of a power hitter. He's got big stolen base potential. They have a bunch of like the lineup fits their team, and I think that gets them over the hump, closer to 500.
Yeah. Um, their offense makes me want to say over, but their pitching makes me want to say under. So I don't know. Like they had 83, 84 wins last year. I think they'll probably be I'll say they take the over. They'll probably be another 80 win team, I would say. I don't know. There's just this bullpen's even disgusting too. Michael Givens, as a Mets fan, I witnessed this dude be absolutely horrendous last year. He's projected a 4 ERA. I think that is way too low for this dude. And everybody else in this bullpen besides Felix Bautista, like you said, is absolutely atrocious. And I mean, they just got to pray John Means can get out going quickly because without him, this rotation is just all their pitching is honestly just terrible. But I'll take their over. I like the Orioles. I'll take their over.
Next, we're on to the third place team from last year's AL East standings, the Tampa Bay Rays. They went 86 and 76, and their line for this season is currently set at 88 and a half wins. So looking at this team's offseason moves, not a whole lot going on. Probably their biggest signing is Zach Eflin from the Phillies, 3-year deal. They also gave out a bunch of contract extensions, including Jeffrey Springs, Pete Fairbanks, and Yandy Diaz.
I mean, yeah, like this is the Rays. They don't really go out and spend money on big names or anything like that. They just make solid like little moves that just always end up working out for them. Like I could probably never follow the Rays, not know a single player, and just assume yeah they'll win like 84, 85 games because they're always just scrappy and they know how to develop players.
So looking at this team's projected opening day lineup, you have Yandy Diaz, Wander Franco, Randy Rosarena, Brendan Lowe, Harold Ramirez, Manuel Margot, Isaac Paredes, Christian Betancourt, and Jose Siri. Um, this team is extremely solid. They they do the same, as you said, they do the same thing pretty much every year. Don't really know everyone. They have guys like Harold Ramirez come out of nowhere and bat 313 last year. They have good young guys like Wander Franco, who needs to stay on the field a little bit more. A little bit of question mark at catcher with Christian Betancourt, but the rest of this lineup is extremely solid. A bunch of high OBPs on this lineup.
Yeah, and that's how this team wins games year in, year out. They just get guys like Yandy Diaz and Wander Franco at the top of their lineup who just get on base. Like you said, Franco just needs to stay on the field because when he's on there, he's amazing. And he's still only 21, so we've seen a lot from him already, and he can continue to improve. Randy Rosarena, playoff god himself, gets on base a ton himself, has a lot of power compared to the rest of this lineup. 20 home runs the past 2 years. Continue. I hope to continue to see that improve. Brandon Lowe got hurt last year, but 2 years ago he had 39 home runs. I expect him to come back and be basically the same player. Maybe not 39, but probably hit from like 25 to 30, maybe a little more. Like you said, the catcher position, Betancourt, little question mark, but most teams in the MLB have pretty bad catchers. So, but Harold Ramirez coming around and batting 300. Manuel Margot, he's pretty good, but the hitting's impressive. But I think their pitching's where it's really at.
Getting into their pitching, we have Shane McClanahan, Tyler Glasnow, Drew Rasmussen, Zach Eflin, and Jeffrey Springs. That's a star-studded rotation. A lot of young guys. McClanahan had a 2.51 ERA with a .92 WHIP last year, and he threw 161 in the third innings. I mean, that's big time numbers. Glasnow was able to actually pitch at the very end of last season, so have a little bit of a head start after having Tommy John surgery for this year. We know what he looks like when he's healthy and on. Looks like a top 5 or 10 pitcher in the AL. And then the Eflin signing is an underrated signing. He had a respectable 4.04 ERA last year. I no problems with him as your 3 or 4 starter in a stacked rotation.
Yeah, like Shane has been great the past 2 seasons. He was an all-star last year, and I honestly expect him to be even better this year. I would say Glasnow would be their ace, but he's had so many injury concerns lately and the past few years. Like ever since coming to the Rays, he's been an injury-prone guy, but when he's healthy, he's dominant, like you said. I would say not only even in the AL, I'd say he's like a top 15, 20 guy in the entire league. The rest of the rotation's really solid. I really like that Eflin signing. Like, yeah, you only use like 1 to 3 guy starters in the postseason, but you need people to get you there, and he's going to eat up innings, and that was just a great signing. Jerry Springs probably the best fifth fifth pitcher in a rotation in all of baseball. Honestly, the Rays probably have like a top 5 rotation, if not better rotation to all of baseball. I'm really excited to see them pitch.
And the good pitching does not stop at the starting rotation. The Rays, as always, have a fantastic bullpen with guys like Peter Fairbanks and Jalen Beeks, all young, all on small money contracts. They just extended Fairbanks to a 3 year, $12 million contract extension. That's nothing for a guy that was able to give them great innings last year. That the Rays know what they're doing when it comes to pitching and developing no name relievers, and it's not going to be different this year.
Yeah, I mean their bullpen's already pretty solid. Like they're projected to all have under 4 ERAs, and I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. And even if it does, they'll probably they'll probably pull up a few new guys that we've never even heard of, and they'll perform. Even in their lineup, like we didn't even talk about that. Like they're probably gonna come up with some random nobodies, just to perform. This is just a team that is built to win by developing players. They don't need to spend money. Like you see Steve Cohen spending $400 million. The Rays made the playoffs. They made the same exact spot as the Mets. Like you do not have to spend money to win baseball games if you're able to produce good pitching and good hitting like these guys are.
With all that being said, I'm probably going to take the over 88.5 on this team. I think the pitching is just going to carry them. I mean, the offense needs to contribute very little if their pitchers can hold up, especially with their projected. And they'll have the Boston Red Sox to kind of beat up on in the division and potentially the Orioles, depending on how their season goes. I think I think they make it over that 88.5 mark.
See, now this one was tough for me because like they won 86 games last year. I feel like 86 would have been a good line to have for them again. So I think I'm probably gonna take the under here with them. Like you're dealing with the Yankees and the Blue Jays. And like you said, they could beat up on the Red Sox, but for all we know, the Orioles could be just as good, if not better, this year. So honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised if the Rays come in fourth place in this division. Like I'm not saying they're a bad team or anything. They have a really solid team. Like I just gassed them up for 3 minutes. It's just that's a high over under set at, and just with their in division, like there's a lot of good teams. Like they're gonna be playing out west too. The Astros, the Mariners, they're good. The Angels usually choke it out, but they're gonna fight them. The Rangers made some big improvements, but yeah, I think I'm just gonna take the under on this one.
So now we're moving on to the second place team from last year's AL East division. We have the Toronto Blue Jays. They finished 92 and 70 last year, and their over under win total line is set at 92 and a half. Looking in at this team's projected starting lineup, you see a lot of familiar faces and a few new ones. We have George Springer, Bo Bichette, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Alejandro Kirk, Dalton Varsho, Matt Chapman, Brandon Belt, Whit Merrifield, and Kevin Kiermaier. Um, George Springer's coming off elbow surgery this offseason, but he should be just fine. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., no signs of him slowing down at all. this lineup is pretty stacked. Uh, they signed Brandon Belt to fill in to give Guerrero some off days at first. They signed Kevin Kiermaier to take the load off of George Springer in center field. You know what you're going to get with Kiermaier: speed, great defense. And they still have Matt Chapman, who should bounce back from what was a semi-disappointing season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm repping the Blue Jays today just for the AL East video. Also, the only one the teams I had out of this a jersey of. But I think the Blue Jays have the deepest lineup out of anybody in this division. You got Springer leading it off. Dude could hit 25, bat around 270. Bo Bichette, who lit up the world in the second half last year. He also had 24 home runs, about 300 average. MVP candidate and Vladdy Guerrero Jr. Like this lineup, and it doesn't even stop there. You know, Alejandro Kirk came out of nowhere. He played well. Varsho should be good. Like you said, Chapman, he had a down year, but I fully expect him to bounce back. Brandon Belt, you know, he could mess around and hit like he can do well. I mean, I don't know if he's getting older now, so he might be fading, but Whit Merrifield at the bottom of that lineup, he used to lead the league in hits. Like he's a solid player. I like this lineup a lot. I think they definitely have the deepest lineup in this entire division.
And you look at this lineup and you see one thing: power, big power from this team. And guys like they added guys like Whit Merrifield midway through last season and Kevin Kiermaier this season, like really help round out that kind of power with some speed, a little bit of contact. To have Santiago Espinal on the bench. This lineup, I mean, they're going to strike out a lot, but other than that, they look pretty well rounded.
Yeah, they're gonna hit a ton of home runs. Like I said, like their top three, Springer, Bichette, Vladdy, could all easily hit. I'm not gonna say easily hit 30, but they're all in the range of 30 home runs. So, well, they're gonna be an exciting power team to watch.
And then moving on to their projected rotation, we have Alek Manoah, Kevin Gausman, Jose Barrios, Chris Bassett, and then the fifth spot should be a competition between Yusei Kikuchi and their prospect Mitch White. Um, Alek Manoah had a fantastic season last year, but the projections have him for a bit of regression. So we'll see how that plays out. Gausman obviously is great. He had a great year last year. He should continue to do just that. And then the big question mark of this whole pitching rotation is Jose Barrios. Can he return to form? Last season was not it for Jose Barrios. You knew when Jose Barrios rolled out on that mound, you could tag him up for 5 to 8 runs. And at the end, it didn't even seem like the Blue Jays cared anymore. They kind of just left him to die on the mound.
Yeah, like you said, Alek Manoah, great last year. I do agree with the projections that he will regress a little bit because he played out of his mind. Gausman, I think, is very solid. I think you know what you're going to get out of him. Barrios, I don't know. There's a lot. You don't know what you're going to get from him this year. Like he was pretty bad last year, but prior to that, he was a pretty solid pitcher. Like I thought that was a great signing last year or trade for. Bassett, I think that was a big move for them, especially since Hyun-Jin Ryu is out with Tommy John until at least mid-season. So he'll definitely, I mean, he's their four starter projected right now. I think he could be a good 3 or 2 in most other rotations. Like look at him with the Mets last year. He was probably the best number 3 pitcher in all of baseball. Granted, he probably could have been better, but he was behind Scherzer and DeGrom. But that fifth spot's gonna be an interesting battle with Kikuchi and White, like you said. I uh I don't know. I think this team's gonna be carried by their offense, but their pitching's not shabby either.
And then just taking a quick look at their bullpen, a bunch of interesting guys in there. You have Jordan Romano, who's been solid for many seasons now. Um, you got a bunch of like good big workhorse veterans like Adam Simber, Anthony Bass, Tim Meza. Believe it or not, Sergio Romo's listed on this roster
You know
in
that.
his 49th MLB season. And it's a there's some question marks, but it should be a bullpen that holds up. I'm more concerned on can the starting pitching hold up as a whole.
I kind of agree with you on that. Their bullpen's pretty solid. Romano, you know how he's gonna be. The rest of it's pretty solid as well, but like you said, the rotation, especially the second half, like I don't really know if they're gonna be able to hold it together for a full season. They did just sign Chad Green, who's dealing with Tommy John as well, so he'll come back around midseason as well. He'll be a nice addition to have. I thought that was a great signing, especially since he's coming over from their rival, the Yankees. So, you added and also took away from a division rival, so that was big. Anthony Bass, I think, yeah, he's getting older and up there, but these kind of relievers, I feel like he's one of those guys that just stays consistent throughout his career.
With all that said, 92 and a half. It's a great line. I'm gonna lean on the under. I This team will make the playoffs. They're gonna hit a crazy amount of home runs. I think they fall slightly under, like very high 80s, anything lower than low 92, 92 and under. I think you have guys that kind of can just they're they're shaky. There's guys that could explode on this team, especially pitching wise. That you don't. I'm looking at you, Jose Barrios. That you don't know, right? So if Alek Manoah and Kevin Gausman do great, and you lose 80% of Jose Barrios' starts because he's giving up 8 runs, I mean they're not going to break that 92 mark. I don't think.
I uh I you know I think I gotta take the over here. I like that offense too much. Like Bo Bichette, like I can't get over how great his second half was. Like he was leading so many offensive categories, and he's hitting right in front of Vlad Guerrero. Like that's beautiful to have in your lineup. I don't know. I think I trust their pitching enough to get them to there. I like Manoah. I like Osman. I think I honestly like Bassett as the three over Berrios. So I think that signing was really underrated, and I think I definitely like their over. It's steep, but I don't know. I think this team's better than they were last year, and they won what 92 games last year. So it's basically where it's at right now, the over under. So I like it. I'll take the over. Yeah.
And we finally have our last team of the day, the New York Yankees. They went 99 and 63 last season. Their over under mark is set for 94 and a half. So currently their projected lineup reads Torres, Judge, Rizzo, Stanton, Donaldson, Bader, Hicks, Oswald Peraza, and Jose Trevino. Um, you look at the top half of that lineup, and it's pretty nice. Uh, Gleyber Torres has kind of been middling now for a couple years. I'd really like to see him get some power back. If he can hit over 20 home runs this season, I think that's great for him. Stanton had probably the most disappointing, I believe 31 home run season anyone could ever have. Um, but you know that if he gets on, he's a very hot and cold kind of player. If he's on at the right time for this team, he's gonna come through. And then I love what they have with Harrison Bader, who they traded for last year. I think he's great addition to that outfield. What's not great is that projected starting lineup still has Josh Donaldson and Aaron Hicks in it. Those are two giant, massive black holes in the lineup. I would like to see them replaced by the end of the year. One guy who's missing, who I didn't read, is DJ LeMahieu, who's always solid. There's no reason why he shouldn't start over Josh Donaldson at third. And then another guy is there's Oswald Peraza, and then there's Oswaldo Cabrera, who should definitely be starting over Aaron Hicks in the outfield. But it's the Yankees, it's Aaron Boone. I'm sure Donaldson and Hicks will get plenty of strikeouts.
Yeah, starting at the top, Gleyber Torres. I thought a few years ago this dude was going to be an MVP contender year in, year out. Unfortunately, he's just kind of, I'm not going to say he's fallen off, but he kind of has. Like, he's still playing solid for compared to other players, but compared to what we saw from him, I think it was like 2018, 2019, he seemed like he was going to be the next big guy. My biggest issue with this team is just health. Aaron Judge, we know him, great, like godly year last year. He's been injured in the years past, but if he stays on the field, he's going to be destroying baseballs left and right. Anthony Rizzo, great signing back. I didn't think they were going to bring him back. I'm so glad they did because he just fits in that lineup so well in between Judge and Stanton. Um, like you said, Stanton hit 31 home runs. I fully expect that number to go up if he stays on the field. He's that dude when it comes to power. Uh, I would also like to see Josh Donaldson not in that lineup. I would like to see LeMahieu over him. When they traded for Bader at the deadline, I thought that was a terrible move. Like I was like, what are you doing? You're getting rid of a solid pitcher for a defensive guy, but all of a sudden he comes to New York and starts hitting baseballs left and right. So I think I think this lineup competes with the Blue Jays for the best in the division for sure.
I forgot to mention that Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is still on this team. If he stays on the team, I'm sure they will play him. I would prefer to see him traded for a vending machine Moneyball style. So, looking at this team's projected starting rotation, we have Garrett Cole, Carlos Rodon, Luis Severino, Nestor Cortez, and Domingo Germán. Um, I mean, you look at that rotation, and it's it's definitely top five in all of baseball. It might be top three, it might be top two, potentially could be top one. Um, Garrett Cole, Mr. Solid, Mr. Consistency. Occasionally, he's going to run out there and get tagged up for like 5 home runs in one game. Other than that, though, he's fine. They're signing Carlos Rodon, um, who's been a perennial Cy Young list candidate. That's a great signing. He's projected under a 3 ERA for the whole season. He worked 178 innings last year for the Giants. I mean, he's an innings destroyer, but not giving up any runs. He's left-handed, which is something that the rotation needed, as they usually only kind of rolled out Cortez as their only lefty. I think it's great. I do see Nestor Cortez, who had a great season last year, having a solid amount of regression. And then for that fifth spot, Domingo Germán, very respectable last year, but I would prefer to see more Clark Schmidt get in that spot, young pitcher for the Yankees. But if Germán is your fifth option, that's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. This rotation is definitely up there for one of the best in baseball. Losing Frankie Montas really hurt, I think. I think if he was still healthy, that they were for sure top three, if not one, like guaranteed. With that said though, I think Garrett Cole is probably the most overrated one in baseball. He had like a 3.23 ERA 2 years ago, a 3.50 last season. He's still great. Like you can't really uh hate on that too much. But I personally, if I was Boone, I'm throwing Rodon as my one. He's a lefty. He's solid. You know what you've got in the past few years out of him. I think he'll take a little bit of regression now that he's going to Yankee Stadium and it's a little smaller. And I agree with you on Cortez that he should regress a little bit, but could because he played out of his mind last year.
The bullpen's solid, should be fine from last year too. They're getting Michael King back. We don't need to talk about that. Personally, I'm going to go with the over. I think this team ends up breaking 100 wins.
Yeah, I don't know how it's set so low at 94.5. They won 99 games. They basically had the same team and brought in Carlos Rodon, a Cy Young candidate. I don't know how it's so low. For sure, I'm locking in the over. This is my lock out of this division.
And that ends this week's episode. Tune in next week to see us do the NL East.